Number 4 overall pick, Indianapolis Colts, has been named the starter. Are you surprised by this?
Not in the slightest bit, no.
I'm not surprised at all, and I'm not surprised just because not because he went 4th overall. I just thought they were going to throw him in there. I just thought they were always going to throw him in there into the mix. I know you've got some takes on this as far as Richardson being called a project. So when you heard this news, I was jokingly saying, as expected, I don't think there was ever really a battle between Anthony Richardson and Gardner Minshew.
No, I don't either. I mean, I barely want to talk about the idea that he's been named starter at all. This is always going to happen. I would, however, like...
Your thoughts? I don't have any.
No, I would like consent to revise my analysis of his preseason debut, which we sort of skimmed over during the review show on Monday, and I actually went back and watched it in its entirety again and have some better thoughts.
Oh, okay, great. Break it down, man.
So number 1, the interception that we were talking about, I actually don't think is a great example of what we were talking about, which is, when things get disrupted a little bit, his mechanics go to hell slightly, and you get back to being the inaccurate version of Anthony Richardson. It was still not a good play, but Alec Pierce on that play is doing something strange. He's like blocking rather than actually running a route to the right place. So it was some miscommunication between the two, in addition to probably not a great read. It's also a weird play where I don't understand what they're running.
The slot may have been off too.
The route combination they're running on that side doesn't make sense. In addition to it being like almost the wrong side for an RPO in the first place, like the whole thing, nothing about that play makes any sense to me from start to finish. So,
really, can I explain it really quick?
Okay.
To the people,
if you must.
It's a run play, as we mentioned the other day. It's an RPO, so you're reading presumably one player to pull it and throw it. The slot was running an out.
Yep.
And then Richardson was throwing what should have been maybe a curl from Alec Pierce. Both routes were run into the same area. So I think where Richardson was maybe off, even if he's expecting something different, he's just kind of chucking it into a very cloudy picture instead of maybe just burying it, saying something's off here. But also the slot may have run the wrong route, and Pierce didn't run a hitch or a curl. He went and kind of like fake blocked and then just got out of the way of the corner who ended up picking it off.
Yeah.
So I think 3 players may have really screwed up that play, both Richardson and the 2 receivers.
Literally nothing about that play makes any sense to me from start to finish. So it's not a great example of what I was talking about on Monday. Having said that, there were examples of what I was talking about on Monday elsewhere in his tape. He didn't miss. He skied a slant really high. Remember when Cam Newton used to miss? It was almost always high over the middle. Like, he didn't tend to miss low or like either side of a guy. He tended to just put it 1.5 yards over where it was supposed to be, which is dangerous because there are other players in the middle of the field, and when you miss high, you tend to hit a defender. So he was really high on a slant that his wide receiver probably wouldn't have thanked him for. There was a hitch where he missed wide that was inaccurate. There was another 2 where the mechanics got a little bit sloppy. It was another hitch where he kind of leaned back in it and just tried to arm it all in there. So the accuracy thing is still a problem, but in particular, it's when he's not in rhythm. When something breaks down and the mechanics go a little bit skewy, and that's when things screw up. But I was really impressed overall with, number 1, when that isn't the case, like when things do fall into place sequentially, mechanically, and the arm is just insane, and it's really, really nice to look at. The corner route to Alec Pierce was an absolutely beautiful throw. But also I thought, again, this was in the puzzle with Richardson, excuse me, is that anytime you get an inexperienced quarterback who's incredibly athletic, we tend to just assume we know what that looks like and label it a project and move on, right? But he's never really been that guy. When you watched his college tape, he wasn't a one-read, look-to-run athlete type of quarterback. He was a guy that wanted to be a pocket-passing quarterback and would hang in the pocket and would do a lot of good quarterbacking things in terms of moving around the pocket, in terms of moving defenders, in terms of eye discipline, all that kind of stuff. And then eventually would have to scramble because, whatever. But that's a very different thing. And even now, there's some really good quarterbacking things to his game that you wouldn't expect for a guy that's barely played. Like, what is it, 21 starts, something like that? He has really good eye discipline and eye manipulation. Like, there was one play very early where I forget what it was, but he ended up coming to, it wasn't his first read, I don't think, but he was looking to try and hit a curl somewhere in the middle. And this was when the starters were still out there for Buffalo, which is a factor, by the way. Like, this was not second team the whole way. So Matt Milano, one of the best coverage linebackers in the NFL, is all over this. Like, sees exactly where Richardson wants to go with it. Richardson looks at it, realizes Milano is going to have a beat on it, and then looks him off, and then comes back to that and hits the guy with a really powerful pass to get the ball there before Milano could make a break on it. There were 3 or 4 times in what was still a pretty limited sample size of him using his eyes to maneuver defenders around deliberately, or, specifically keeping his eyes away from the target that he wants to go to instead of staring it down and giving the guy a bead to go get it. So, again, this is way more complicated than he's just a project athlete. He is an inexperienced quarterback, but he does a lot of pretty high-level quarterback things. His biggest flaw is simply he hasn't seen enough yet. Like, he's going to be surprised, and he's going to make some mistakes, and he's going to get fooled by NFL defenses because they're that good and they're that capable of tricking you, essentially. But I think he is quite a high-level processor. The biggest concern, though, is still that accuracy, which is going to raise its head.
That was my biggest takeaway, I think, during the scouting process.
Yeah.
It's just legitimate accuracy.
Right.
And I'm not going to go on my little, whatever. I'm not going to rant about.
And I think even that might be better than it was already. Like, I think he's made improvements, but there's still plays there where it's like, yeah, you see, there it is again.
So that's where I know your initial take was make him the starter because he's got to see stuff. He just needs experience.
Yeah.
And we were pretty honest about Trey Lance not looking good the other day. But we also pointed out what he's got less than 500 dropbacks in the last 4 or 5 years as a quarterback.
Yeah.
He does have 3 years in Kyle Shanahan's system. Maybe mental reps and seeing things and understanding of the system and everything. He should be working a little bit quicker, but there's still inexperience there. So you just throw Richardson in and let him be experienced. There was Burt Breer tweeted out yesterday, like through a scout or whatever it was. The mechanics are good on Anthony Richardson, and I always get off on this thing. I didn't say that. I always get mad about when people say, cut that all, cut it.
Clip that one as well.
No, don't clip anything. I get mad when people say, this guy has good mechanics when they're inaccurate. Somebody said Christian Hackenberg had good mechanics at the time. And that's just a misunderstanding.
He mechanically, soundly
of
threw
throwing
that ball
mechanics.
into the dirt.
The whole point of throwing mechanics is to throw the ball accurately and with velocity and touch or whatever you want to put on the ball. And you want to throw it where you want. If you're not doing that, the mechanics can't be good. Because the whole point of you're using your legs to throw and your hips and using your whole body to throw is to get your release point to the right place. And if you're missing throws, your release point is not in the right place. So the report was, hey, he's got good. He doesn't need mechanical work. And to me, however you define mechanics, I think he's got to work a little. See more things, help that ties your feet to your arm and all that. But he's got to hit more throws. That was my takeaway in Florida. They ran a lot of. I watched all of his drop back passes in a row, and it's a lot of the same concepts.
Sure.
And one time he would hit the concept perfectly, and another time he would just miss the throw. So that part of it, the mechanical part of it, I do think needs to be tidied up for Richardson. But your main point in comparing him to Lamar and the fact that he wants to go through reads and do quarterback things, I think that's all correct.
There's also not that many quarterbacks who, in rhythm, with a clean pocket, et cetera, aren't mechanically sound. Like, that's the easy part. You've done that a million times, like the drill that you do, the basic warm up of just quick 5-step drop mechanics, throw the ball. Like, the easy, everybody does that reasonably well. There's very few players where you look at them and you go, what is this travesty? We need to spend the next 3 years rebuilding this from the ground up. It's like Tim Tebow and Byron Leftwich, end of list. right? Like, this can't work. The way you throw the football is fundamentally broken. I actually can't believe you've made it as far as you have with that, like, abomination of a throwing mechanic.
Left twitch was fascinating because it was a full. I mean, Tebow was a full windup too.
It's like a windmill.
Left twitch was a full windup, and he threw lasers.
Yeah. But, like, there's very few players that make it as far as the NFL where you look at that and you go, what the hell am I even looking at? This is insane. So most of these guys, in those situations, the mechanics are fine. The issue is the whatever percentage of plays in the NFL where you have to do it from a different weird platform or strange angle, or where the mechanic, like the traditional throwing mechanics from a stable base, disappear and you have to be able to change it. Like, half of what Mahomes does is not sound throwing mechanics, but he practices that and he knows how to do it, and the ball comes out exactly where it's supposed to be almost every single time. So it works, right? That's where Richardson isn't sound at the moment. It's when he, the thing isn't 100% exactly where it needs to be. Something changes in the mechanics, and instead of the ball being exactly where it needs to be, the ball's now a yard too high, or the ball's now a yard to the right. Like, that is where he's screwing up. And he's far from alone in that. Like, there's a lot of quarterbacks where that's the biggest problem. But the underlying point in all this is I think he's like the poster child for a quarterback that needs to play right away, because you don't need to change anything about him right now. You just need to get him experience. And you can't do that from the sideline. You can't do that in practice. You can't do that from the bench. He needs to be taking live reps, and you have that rushing ability to basically prop him up while you get him those reps. Like, you've run this playbook already with Jalen Hurts, with Justin Fields last year. Like, we've seen how this can look, even if he's not a good passer right away, which he might be the furthest along of the three, ironically, despite the lack of experience.